Hello everyone, my name is Elijah David, minister of the 12th Hour Apostolic Sabbatarian Congregation on the 12th Hour in Liberty Hill, Texas. Today is June the 26th, 2013, it is the 18th day of the 4th month, 2017. We'll start our first service today with a song entitled, My Hope is Built on Nothing Less. My hope is built on nothing less than Yahshua's blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest friend, but wholly lean on Yahshua's name. Only Yahshua the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. When darkness veils his lovely face, I rushed on his unchanging grace. In every high and stormy gale, my anchor holds within the veil. Only Yahshua the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. His oath is covenant, his blood support me in the whelming flood. When all around my soul gives way, he then is all my hope and stay. Only us for the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. When he shall come with trumpet sound, oh may I then in him be found. Dressed in his righteousness alone, well blessed to stand before the throne. Only us with a solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. Part 2, Shepherd Rod Tract number 1. We're going to continue on here with 144,000. That's the name of our series, actually. And we're on page 17 of the little tract by the B.T. Harloff, the man that's the author of the Shepherd's Rod, the Seventh-day Adventist that came out of the Adventist Church. Actually, he didn't come out. The Adventists kicked him out when he advanced with new truth, and especially about the continuing saga of the 144,000 that was born with Ellen G. White, the prophetess of the Seventh-day Adventist movement in 1844. Her first vision out of 2,000 dreams and visions that she had, she was shown as 144,000. Okay, and showing that they would come forth out of the bowels of the Seventh-day Adventist movement. She didn't know how long the movement would be, but she was shown that the 144,000 would be the culmination of the Advent movement, and that they would emerge as the first fruits when it come time for the harvest of this earth's history. Okay, so now as we look at the prophetic time clock, we have our charts here, and so we look at this 24-hour time clock. Now the deal is that the Seventh-day Adventists, if we get this a little closer view on this chart, I would like to show watching the audience out there, up close, some numbers. Now these numbers reveal the parabolic time, an hour that we're in. Yeshua says in John 11:9, are there not 12 hours in the day? So you start counting with the first hour. That's when the sun comes up in the morning. You start the first hour right here. Second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now notice when it strikes 12, there's still daylight until sundown. And when the sun goes down, that's the end of the 12th hour. And now we start with number 1 again. We start counting the 12 hours of the night. And you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And when you come to the 12th hour of the night, you still have one more hour of darkness before sunrise. Then when the sun comes up at the first hour, you start your 12-hour daylight all over again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now keep in mind that these hours move forward. They don't pick up earlier. Okay? So now, what I'm saying is, when you strike number 1 in the morning, and the sun starts coming up, you have to have 60 minutes equivalent to that number 1 hour in order before you can call it number 2. So then it's 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, moving forward. But the way the man of sin manipulated our clocks on the wall, he started the day with 12. And so then you always had to go back and reach back and say, well, the first hour began right here at 12. You always had to reach back and count your 60 minutes for that hour. But when you put the hour in the right place, the beginning of the hour, you move this time clock back a slot. You put 1 in place of 12 to start the day out, and then now your time moves forward. And then when you get to the last number, 12, you still have 1 hour until sundown, so you get to account for, 12 hours of the daylight. Now, I'm going to tell you something else. 144,000 are based numerically upon your 24-hour time clock. Now, your 24 hours time clock, there's 60 minutes to the hour, and you multiply 24 times 60. Okay? And what do you have? You have 144,000. 24 hours times 60 minutes to an hour. Or you have 144 or 1,440 minutes to a day. Okay? To a 24-hour day. You put another 0 on it, a couple zeros on it, you got 144,000 seconds. That type of thing. Okay. So, 12 times 12 and also 2 12 hours makes out a full 24-hour day. 12 plus 12 is 24. 24 times 6 is 144. 24 times 60 is 1440. Staying with the numerical value of the quantity of the 144,000 number. Okay, so now the Adventists came forth right here at the beginning of the 10th hour, 1844. And the Adventists finished their first phase of their work with the 3 angels' messages, closing out the 10th hour in 1970, giving way to Brother W. Johnson, the third feeding pastor Gilead Center. Now keep in mind, in the 10th hour from 1844 to 1930, you had B.T. Holliff, the shepherd rod, come in the middle of this, between this 10 and 11. 1930, he came about the midst of this 10th hour as a second group of laborers in the vineyard with the Seventh-day Adventists, because he was called by Matthew 20 verse 5, where it says 6th and 9th hour laborers. He was part of that 9th hour labor group that was called. And so Richie Hollis, the shepherd rod, a Davidian Seventh-day Adventist, incidentally, was part of that fourth group that was called in 1844 the Seventh-day Adventist. He worked in up to 1930, and then he was called at 1930, and then he worked for the shepherd rod from 1930 to 1970, which ended right here at the 11th hour. And started with Brother Johnson taking over the 11th hour, and I was called at the 11th hour to work with Brother Stephen Johnson in 1970, and we had our run from 1970 to 2003. 2003 is when the 11th parabolic hour ended and the 12th hour opened up, closing out the judgment of the dead, right here. During that 33-year period, closed out the judgment of the dead for the Seventh-day Adventist. And keep in mind that Brother Johnson and I, him being the elder in charge of Gilead Center, and the Branch Davidian Seventh-day Adventist, he was the elder, I was the younger. We personified the Esau and Jacob, spiritual twin brothers, okay, that was born to the Seventh-day Adventist Church during the time the Seventh-day Adventist Church was still in charge. Okay, so the Seventh-day Adventist Church were in charge from 1844, starting at the 10th hour, up until 2003. They were in charge of the vineyard. They had 3 feeding pastures. Bashan started here. The second feeding pasture, Carmel, the shepherd rod, started between 10 and 11, 1930. The Branch Davidian, Isaac Branch Davidian Seventh-day Adventist with Brother Johnson and myself called to occupy the 11th parabolic hour. So I worked the whole 11th parabolic hour as the one that was learning from the elder and inherited the birthright from Antitypical Esau, Brother Stephen Johnson, at Kermit, Texas, Gilead Center, still a part of the Seventh-day Adventist movement. In the 11th parabolic hour, and part of that fourth group of laborers called in Matthew 20, verse 5. Now we have one more group of laborers to be called, and that's your fifth group, Matthew 20, verse 6, called at the 11th hour. Now the 11th hour ended right here, when it struck 12. So the 11th hour, right here, I was called out of the 10th hour, as well as Brother Johnson was called out of the 10th hour to work in the 11th, in the third feeding pasture, Gilead Center. And then he and I worked the whole 33 years. We separated at the end of 33 years, 2003, and I was given the mantle placed on me, change of the guard, from Antitypical Esau, Brother Johnson, to Antitypical Jacob, Elijah David. Okay. I got a name change at the same time that the mantle was placed upon me, 2003. I got a name change. That was Elijah David. My name then was my birth name, Denton Brunken. Brother Johnson never did take a name change. He held on to that name as his birth name, all the way through his ministry, proving that he wasn't the one to continue on in the 12th hour during the harvest time of Earth's history. He wasn't the lead out in that. So now, this is where we're working at right now. We're in the beginning of the 12th parabolic hour. We're right here, somewhere after the 12th hour started in 2003. We've been 10 years now into the 12th parabolic hour. Now keep in mind, William Miller had the 7th, 8th, and 9th parabolic hour over a 10-year period. Okay? From 1833 to 1844. He had the 6th candlestick, Philadelphia. He was called First Day Adventist. That was his name. He had the 2300-year prophecy that he announced in 1833, and at the end of the 9th parabolic hour, when it closed out in 1844, he announced the 2300 days fulfillment and the cleansing of the sanctuary, Daniel 8:14, and the start of the judgment of the dead. Well, actually, Ellen G. White announced the judgment of the dead when she took over in 1844. At the atonement, which fell on the 22nd day of October that year, as best they could figure it, and it was considered, Sister White said, to be the 10th day of the 7th month according to the law of Moses. So the Adventists began with the concept of the restoring of the sanctuary. That's what the 2300 days called for. When it made its fulfillment in 1844, it said that you are to start the judgment of the dead, and according to the prophecy. Okay, Adventists did that, and they fulfilled Revelation chapter 10. You must prophesy again to many nations, not to all, only to many. Because William Miller, part of the Advent movement, was found to be number 6. He was found to be the number 6, where it called Matthew 20, verse 5, said, at the 6th and 9th hour. So William Miller is called at the end of the 6th hour, which is number 7, right here. 6 is right here. William Miller is called at the end of the 6th hour. That's what he was called the 6th hour, when the 6th hour had met its fulfillment, right here. And then you start with number 7. He has the 7th, 8th, and 9th parabolic hour between 1833 and 1844. Okay, now having said all of that, I hope you folks out there listening understand that there are 3 groups of laborers in the Advent movement, starting in 1833 with William Miller. Matthew 20, verse 5 says there are 2 groups, the 6th and 9th hour called laborers, which is William Miller, and the Seventh-day Adventists, which is First-day Adventists, William Miller, and the Seventh-day Adventists, Ellen G. White. And there were 2 groups of laborers. And then in Matthew 20, verse 6 is your 3rd group of laborers that is called to work in this last, well actually, the 3 groups of laborers had a 6 parabolic hours to work in. William Miller, the 3rd group, had these 3 hours. And then Ellen G. White and the Seventh-day Adventists, and the Davidian Seventh-day Adventists of Shepherd Rod 1930, and the Branch Davidian Seventh-day Adventists in 1970, occupied only 2 parabolic hours. And that was from 1970 here to 2003. Okay. So, actually, the Adventists had 2 parabolic hours from 1844 to 2003, 10th and the 11th. And now, Elijah David has the last parabolic hour solely by himself. And not really solely by himself, he starts the judgment of the living, but when 144,000 coming forth, then you're going to have the great multitude after that, and hundreds of millions after that, and you're going to have all those in Revelation 18 come out of Revelation 18 that come out of Babylon. They're going to all join this house of David here in this 12th parabolic hour. You're going to have the resurrection of the dead, or clear back to Adam and Eve, the harvest of the righteous dead. You're going to have the judgment of the living and the harvest of the living at the same time. You're going to join all the saints in their graves for the last 6,000 years. It's going to come forth, join the righteous living. And so, having said all of that, let us now continue with our study of the Shepherd Rod, Volume 1 Tract. This is a condensed version of the original Shepherd Rod, Volume 1 that B.T. Hollis wrote. The Shepherd Rod later starting in 1930. He says, on page 17, he says, the second fruits, the great multitude. After this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all the nations and kindreds and people and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with the white robes and palms in their hands. Revelation 7:9. Okay, so that would be your second fruits. Okay, 144,000 are your first fruits. Leading into the identification of this great multitude, inspiration has given several clues, one of which is a classification of the redeemed of all ages. From the martyrdom of Abel unto the close of the probation, Group 1. Nearest the throne are those who were once zealous in the cause of Satan, but who, plucked as brands from the burning, have followed their Savior with a deep, intense devotion. Group 2. Next are those who perfected Christian characters in the midst of the falsehood and infidelity, those who honor the law of the Elohim when the Christian world declared it void. Group 3, and the millions of all ages who were martyred for their faith. Group 4 and beyond is a great multitude which no man can number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues, before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands. Great Controversy 665. Here a momentous question presses for the answer. Since we are plainly shown that the great multitude, Group 4, are a company separate from the plucked brands of Group 1, from the overcomers of the falsehood and infidelity, Group 2, and from the martyrs of all time, Group 3, how can the great multitude possibly be composed of the saints of all ages, of all the redeemed? Very obviously they cannot. Consequently, if they are not Group 1, 2, or 3, then who can they be but the living saints? And since they are not the 144,000, the first fruits of the living, they must then be second fruits. Indeed, there must be second fruits, for the term first fruits calls for the second fruits just as much as the term first resurrection, Revelation 20 verse 6, calls for a second resurrection, and as much as the term second death, Revelation 20:14, calls for a first death. Nevertheless, still another baffling question requires an answer. If the Yeshua's query, when the Son of Man cometh, shall he find faith on the earth? Luke 18:8. Also, his statement, fear not, little flock, Luke 12:32, mean that few are to be saved and found living when he comes. For his own, then how can there be an innumerable multitude? Though at first glance the question propounds a paradox, it is quickly resolved, and the idea that only a few living saints are to meet him in the air is effectively dissipated when account is taken of the fact that the harvest truly is plenteous, Matthew 9:37, that it is the end of the world, Matthew 13:39, and that the very term harvesting itself denotes a larger gathering than at any previous season. Furthermore, the query, shall they find faith on the earth, is not questioning the number of the saints at this particular coming, but rather faith itself regardless of the number. And if at his appearing in the clouds to take home the faithful, he finds no faith in the earth, then what about his waiting church, which is to be without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, be it small or great? Obviously, his coming recorded in Luke 18:8 cannot be the one of 1 Thessalonians 4:17. His coming in the clouds, but it could be the one of Malachi 3:2 and 3, and Matthew 13:30, and 47 to 48, leading unto the Matthew 25:31 and 33. His coming unto his temple is to separate the sinners from the saints, at the commencement of which time inspiration asks, who may abide the day of his coming? And now in the prophet's own words comes the overall evidence of the ingetting of a great multitude of the living saints during the harvest time. And the 844,000 who escaped the slain are abide the day, Isaiah 66:16, and the separation of the tares from the wheat, Matthew 13:30-41, the harvest of the first fruits, Revelation 14:4, the 144,000, The servants of the Elohim, Revelation 7:3, is also talks about this sealing of the 144,000. Shall bring all your brethren for an offering unto the Yahweh out of all nations, upon horses and in chariots and in litters and upon mules and upon swift beasts to my holy mountain. Those swift beasts is your flying saucers. They're not helicopters and airplanes. This fossilized fuel here in America. These traveling vehicles are antique compared to the flying saucers. Well, if our government has a blueprint and makes flying saucers, which they do, where do you think they got that blueprint from? They had to get it from heaven. Okay. And upon swift beasts to my holy mountain, Jerusalem, saith the Yahweh, as the children of Israel bring an offering in a clean vessel into the house of Yahweh, Isaiah 6:20. What is this clean vessel? This is a sanctuary. Okay. This is that traveling sanctuary. Well, them flying saucers is going to have that sanctuary in it that Yahshua brings back. He comes back with 20,000 flying saucers. Now, you may think that I've gone off the end of my rocker, but you will read about that in Psalm 68:17. That's where the prophecy is at. Okay. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them, and the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Daniel 2:35. And it shall come to pass in the last days, now pay attention to this, folks, that the mountain of the house of the Yahweh shall be established in the top of the mountains. It shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. Okay, now, we have a couple of charts that show some mountains on them. Now, this mountain of the house of Yahweh is none other but this little stone that was hewn out of that great mountain, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which is the house of David. And this is a mountain that's going to be established in the top of the mountain. Now, I want to turn to the chart and show this to you. Right here. As I've told you before, this chart represents right here, if we can get a close-up, I want to show this to you. This little chart right here shows a little stone being hewn out of the mountain with our hands. This is the mountain of the house of Yahweh we just read about, Isaiah 2 and Micah 4. This is the house of David, hewn out of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in 2002 at Kermit, Texas, Gilead Center. Representing this whole mountain. Gilead Center represents this whole mountain that belongs to the Seventh-day Adventists from 1844 to 2003. Okay. Now, it says that the little stone grows into a mountain and fills the whole earth. Daniel 2:34 and 35, Daniel 2:44 and 45. As we cross on. Now, let's look at that mountain that it goes into. We have a chart for that as well. And if I can hurriedly find it, we'll see what we can do here. It's about the chart with those 4 teams of horses that came out between these two brass mountains. This brass mountain belonged to the apostolic movement in the 1st century. With the disciples that had building this mountain. They started out as a little stone. And after Yahshua commissioned them after his resurrection, he commissioned the disciples. They started out as a little stone, but they grew into a big mountain. And this mountain here was part of this mountain. But this mountain was separated by time. This mountain was supposed to continue on to the end of time, but this mountain became separated because of world events. You had to have Rome, the fourth beast in Daniel's vision. He had to have his rule. So Rome came on the scene, was on the scene at the time of this brass mountain was made. And this Rome, Imperial Rome, which developed into the Catholic Church today, infiltrated this church, this mountain here, and took it captive. And so now, and went into the Dark Ages with it. From actually took it captive by 508 AD, 500 years after the cross. Rome had finally captured this brass mountain, completely took control of it, and was in control of it actually for about 1,260 years, from 538 to 1844, was in control of this brass mountain. But Martin Luther started the Reformation in 1500 and broke the back of the Inquisition of the Catholic Church, ruling the whole world with church and state. And so Martin Luther started breaking the back by 1890, by 1798 I mean, right here. The back of the Catholic Church was broken, and then you had this brass mountain then begin to take shape, show up as reappearance of this here mountain here. So this is the kingdom of grace, apostles at the cross, seated up, and here's the kingdom of glory. The little stone hewn out of the mountain that strikes the image on the feet back here, as I showed you, that was hewn out of this mountain right here. This little stone, House of David, 2003, had been his church. Zechariah 4:7, who art thou, O great mountain? Before the rubble, thou shalt become a plain. All right. Now, that little stone hewn out of that mountain grows into a mountain and fills the whole earth, this second brass mountain. With the house of David in charge of, because the house of David is actually what this brass mountain is. So now, when we read to you that when it says, and it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Yahweh's house, okay, so this is the mountain, this second brass mountain, the kingdom of glory. This is the mountain of the Yahweh's house. This is the house of David. And keep in mind, what makes it grow into a huge brass mountain is the fact that Yeshua now is the pilot of this mountain, the Son. He has come and taken his place upon the throne of David, Luke 1:32, and now he's a pilot, and that's why this here mountain goes into an eternal mountain, goes into eternity. So when we read that again, it says, and it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the house of the Yahweh, the house of David now is the house of Yahweh. I can show it to you in the scriptures. It actually says that. Shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. And many people shall go and say, come ye, and let us go up unto the mountain, this huge brass mountain here, that started emerging, and actually started emerging right here between 1844 and 1890. And it just continued to grow. Okay. Here's 1930 right here, and you have 1930, then you have 1970, and then you have 2003 right here, and right here is where this brass mountain emerges into the 12th parabolic hour, and it goes on clear into eternity. Okay, now it says, and many people shall go and say, come ye and let us go up unto that mountain, to the mountain of the Yahweh, unto the house of the Elohim of the Jacob. Isaiah 2 and 3. You can also read Micah 4, 1 through 4 on that as well. Keeping these correlated forecasts steadily in view, none but the blind can fail to see that the idea of only a few saved in the true is true only of the number saved during any pre-harvest message-bearing period. Now keep in mind that the Adventists worked from 1844, right here, from 1844 to 1890. First feeding participation. This is all that the Adventists occupied the vineyard when they came on the scene in 1844. From 1890, you had a 40-year spiritual fast for Judah, which the Adventists had no part of, from 1890 to 1930. And then at the end of 1930, the shepherd rod emerged as the house and tribe of Judah out of the Adventist church. And then the shepherd rod ruled from 1930 to 1970. And then you had the branch Davidian in 70 Adventist ruled from 1970 to 2003, and I was part of that leadership. I was part of those ancient men for the house that when the judgment started in 2003 with the Gilead Center. When it says in the time that came that the judgment must begin at the house of Yahweh, 1 Peter 4:17. And Ezekiel 9:6 says it starts with the ancient men for the house. Well, I was one of those ancient men. I came to the judgment 2003 at the end of the 11th parabolic hour that I worked in with Brother Stephanie Johnson. But he was separated from us because he represented this lead team of horses here in this fourth church. He represented this lead team. Right here, these grizzled horses. The fourth church right here is the Seventh-day Adventist Church, later said. The bay horses here are the true prophets that's put and connected to the church, directly to it. The grizzled horses was added on later. They were hooked in front of the bay horses. This represents the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists that's formed against Sister White's will. This represents the false prophets that fall away, that's at the head of the pulpit of the church. And so these grizzled horses was represented by Brother Johnson in 2003 as leading this team of later said, the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I represented the bay, the house of David, from the house of Jacob. And I was waiting for the lead team to be cut loose. They were cut loose in 2003. And they set us free now. And so instead of remaining in the South Country where this lead team had led them back down to Egypt, Sister White says, we're steadily retreating back to Egypt in her day. She said, by 1890, she said, when they rejected the Jones and Wagner's message of the angel, Revelation 18, one angel coming down with righteous by faith message, and they rejected that. She said they showed that they had successfully made it back to Egypt then in 1890. So the Adventist Church, as far as having the benefit of unfolding prophecy and declaring judgment in the world, ended in 1890 with their first feeding pasture coming to a close and drying up. Bashan, called Bashan. Okay? So now, but the grizzled horses, that's representing the General Conference President and his officers, they were connected to these bay horses in 1890. They were connected up way back there in 1844, actually. Is when they connected up with these horses. This chariot right here began in 1833 with William Miller, the third group of laborers, the First-day Adventists. This chariot began with them. And they represented the bay horses as well, our leadership, from 1833 to 1890. But in 1844, these grizzled horses representing the double leadership that was vying for the double leadership hooked up to these bay horses. All right, now Ellen White took the reins of these bay horses in 1844. This pure doctrinal leadership, she had inspiration. Inspiration only belongs to the bay horses. The first team connected to the church of Laodicea. The second team represents without inspiration, but they're vying for the leadership. So whenever the grizzled horses connected to the bay horses in 1844, who was in charge of the bay horses? I mean the grizzled horses, the second team. And they connected to it. James White, Ellen G. White's husband. He was opposed to, he opposed her indirectly until the day he died in 1881. But she needed his name. It was the right name. She needed his name. She needed his support. But he didn't have inspiration. And he coveted inspiration. He wanted Sister White's position. But him being the man, he thought he ought to be the head of the house. He thought he ought to be the head of the work. So he was right there in 1863 when the Adventists formed the General Conference Association of Seventh-day Adventists by organizing and appointing a president. James White became the second president, and he was the president of the General Conference no less than 3 times for the next 17 years. From 1863 to 1880, he was the General Conference president, elected 3 different times. He wanted to so much be the head of the Adventist Church. He just tried every way in his world to be the sole head of it. And he opposed Ellen G. White, and so when he couldn't get his way, and he already wouldn't honor him to take over the movement, and to take over his wife, then he said, well, I'll just die and get out of here. So he was just 59 years old, 1881, 60 years old at the moment. And the wife came in to him on his deathbed. She said, husband, I can call the elders in, and they can pray over you, and we can anoint you, and Yahweh will raise you up. Oh no, he said, I'm tired of it. I want to go on. Just let me alone. So he turned down the offer to be divinely healed. Because if he couldn't be healed and then take over Ellen G. White's position in the church, he just wanted to go ahead and die, and that's what he did. Got him out of the way. Sister White had to run the church for the next 34 years by herself, and then she died. Strictly solely in charge of the office of inspiration, one and only woman, Ellen G. White, the popular. She's the only one in charge of the office of inspiration until she died in 1915. But the General Conference continued on, organized, opposing Sister White and the Bay Horses. They represented the Grizzle Horses. Okay. So those Grizzle Horses changed hands all through the years. They changed hands to false prophets from the General Conference president, these Grizzle Horses, to false prophets. Ben Roden was one of them that inherited this leadership of these Grizzle Horses, the successor of E.T. Hollis when he died in 1955. Okay. So now, Rhoda Johnson then inherited the Bay Horses. When Ben Roden inherited the Grizzle Horses, Rhoda Johnson inherited the Bay Horses in 1955. And Rhoda Johnson stayed true to the rod message for the next 15 years. He stayed true to it. Ben Roden didn't, the one that took over the Grizzle Horse leadership of the Shepherd's Rod to finish out the last 15 years. He didn't stay true to it, because he represented these Grizzle Horses nondescript. You couldn't tell what he stood for. But Brother Johnson represented these pure Bay Horses, because he kept Ben Roden's feet to the fire on the rod message. He kept him in line. Ben Roden didn't like it. That's what separated the Bay Horses from the Grizzle Horses in 1970. But then Rhoda Johnson advances to the leadership of the Grizzle Horses, and I was called to work in this church, Laodicea, Portland, this church, in 1970, to work with the Grizzle Horses. So Rhoda Johnson, being the older, he stepped up here and took the Grizzle Horses. I took the Bay Horses. So as each one of these horses changed leaderships, the Bay changed leaderships, the Grizzle changed leaderships. Whenever the Grizzle had a change in leadership, the Bay had a change in leadership. From 1844 through up to 2003. Finally, these Grizzle Horses were cut loose in 2003. And they were retired because they had successfully pulled this church back to the South Country. I hope you can see that there, where it says South Country, Egypt. They had successfully taken the Adventist church back to Egypt for sure to retire there in 2003. Sister White said they had successfully made it back to Egypt in 1890, and I believe that. But these bay horses sought to go to and fro through the earth all that time. And so right here, you show a little map right here of them doing it, going to and fro through the earth. But they really didn't go to and fro through the earth. They sought to, but they didn't get to make it. But 2003 on now, since they have been separated now from these grizzled horses, we're commissioned now to set up the kingdom, and now as soon as 144,000 comes forth, they'll take this leadership of the bay horses. That's the only one's connected now to this chariot. This chariot emerges into the chariot of David, the 10th candlestick, not the 7th candlestick anymore, but the 10th candlestick, and it's no longer called Laodicea. It's now called the mountain of the house of Yahweh, which is the everlasting kingdom of the David sit up here. Okay. And we have the 10th candlestick pointed out there in Zechariah 4's prophecy. The Seventh-day Adventists had the 7th candlestick of the 7, and they were the 9th candlestick of the 10. I represent the 10th candlestick of the 10. Zechariah 4 prophecy. Now folks, this is strong meat. Now, only those that have faithfully followed the rod movement that succeeded the Adventists with the shepherd rods material, those that have faithfully stayed with that, that was revealed to them the 4th and the 5th angel. They joined the 3rd angel. The shepherd rod revealed those 2 angels and published them and published their work. The 4th angel was the sealing angel from the east in Revelation 7 that's come to seal the 144,000. And that 5th angel, found in Revelation 18:1, was to come and lighten the whole earth with his glory in the 12th parabolic hour. So what are we looking at? We're looking at only the Davidian Seventh-day Adventists. And now the Davidian Seventh-day Adventists are made up of Seventh-day Adventists. Seventh-day Adventists graduated and joined the Davidians when they came on the scene, and then the Davidians graduated and joined the Branch Davidians when they came on the scene in 1970. That was the ones that I joined, the Branch Davidians, 1970. And those that continued on advancing with that light as it unfolded through those 3 feeding passages can only understand the language that I'm talking right now. And then now I'm going to tell you something else. All of you newcomers, you Gentiles out there, Yahweh is not going to shortchange you all, because if you can let the Spirit give you understanding as well, as I explain these things to you, this is condensed prophecy. This is strong meat. But if you've been living up to all the light that you've had in the church that you've been in, whatever church it may be, Sabbath keeping or Sunday keeping, if you've been living up to all the light and you're morally a good Christian, then the Holy Spirit will give you to understand this strong meat. And you know, and when you understand it, you'll know then that you were called to be a part of it. That's how you know. And if you accept it and you come walk in it, in the light of it, and you can contact us on our website if you want to join us and support this movement, because this is Elijah's movement. This is Malachi 4:5. I represent Antitypical Elijah. And so, he's the only one that will have a message that will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the children back to the fathers. Yes, Yahweh comes and smites the earth with a curse here in this 12th hour. So, pray strong and hard, because I'm going to be giving you a series from here on in of the 144,000, of the remnant, and how they come about and get into where we're at. I'll be explaining all these prophetic charts, and I have about 18 good ones here, prophetic charts that explain all of the necessary prophecies that you need to know and understand. And you have the 7 churches of Asia. We call them the 7 congregations of Israel. And they have their origin in the Old Testament: Ephesus, first church; Smyrna, Pergamos, the 3rd one; Thyatira, the 4th one; Sardis, the 5th one; Philadelphia, the 6th one; and Laodicea, last but not least, the seventh one. They all have a candlestick, which represents the sanctuary service of Israel. So these are all Israelite churches, and they're also Gentile churches. The Gentiles are kinfolks, blood connected to the house of Israel. They're brethren. Paul says so there in Ephesians 2. He said, I'm a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin. He said, you all are brethren. You come from the north. You come from the Gentile world. You come from my brethren in the north of the 10 tribes of Israel. So he identified them and told them who they were. He said, you're part of Israel. You're made now by the blood of Yahshua, he said in Ephesians chapter 2. Okay, so now, there's a lot to be said about the mountain of the house of Yahweh. Here now the mountain, there's a little stone in Daniel 2, 44 and 45, and strikes the image on the feet, and goes into a mountain filled with the whole earth. That image is in the Advent church. That's where it ended up. Nebuchadnezzar saw this in vision. Daniel interpreted for him. And he said an interpretation of the dream is certain, that it will come to pass. Exactly what the vision had in it to tell for the clear at the end of time, it will come to pass exactly the way that it's been revealed to you. Okay. So it says that keeping these correlated forecasts steadily in view, none but the blind can fail to see that the idea of only a few saved and the is true only of the number saved during any pre-harvest message-bearing period, not although of the number saved during the harvest time itself. For the great multitude, the second fruits of the living saints, moreover, are also found projected in certain demonstration in the time. Number one, Moses upon the Mount of the Transfiguration was a witness unto Yahshua's victory over sin and death. He represented those who shall come forth from the grave at the resurrection of the just. Number two, and the graves were opened, and the many bodies of the saints which slept arose and came out of the grave after his resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared unto many. Okay. Matthew 27, 52 and 53. Okay, number three, Elijah, who had been translated to heaven without sin, death, represented those who will be living upon the earth at the Yahshua's second coming. Okay, and who will be changed in a moment in the twinkling of an eye at the last trump. Number four, as Enoch was translated to heaven before the destruction of the world by the water, so the living righteous will be translated from the earth before its destruction by the fire. In these passages we are shown four types, calling for the two companies of the resurrected saints and for the two companies of the translated saints. Since there are two types for the living, and as Enoch himself was not a descendant of the Jacob, he cannot logically represent Jacob's descendants, the 144,000. In fact, the name Jacob, or the title Israelite, did not even come into existence until centuries after Enoch was translated. Accordingly, Elijah, an Israelite himself, logically typifies the 144,000, and Enoch logically typifies the great multitude, who are from all nations and kindreds and people and tongues, Revelation 7:9. Because from his generation have descended all nations at their master's final call, then appear in a beautiful symmetry the trophies of the gospel. What does gospel mean? It's two parts of an old English word. God spelled it out in the law of Moses. Okay, so it means the teaching of the plan of salvation through the blood of the everlasting covenant. That's who these people are. They're the trophies of those who taught the plan of salvation through the blood of Yahshua. Two hosts of the resurrected with their types, and two hosts of the translated with their types. Oh, what an ineffable, wondrous, and awesome sight, for the glorious host of the redeemed sweeping through the portals of the glory and marching down the gold-paved street of the paradise unto the strains of celestial anthems which the mortal ear has never heard. Okay, parade of the parades, behold it pass. First, the millions of the escorting angels who ministered unto the redeemed in all ages. Second, Moses, the first inspired penman, general, and leader, peerless among men, clothed in the white and crowned with a glittering golden crown, leading the band of the resurrected themselves, wearing a white robes and golden crowns. Third, Abel, first among the martyrs, leading the martyred host of the ages, all clad in the glorious white robes with the borders of the red. Fourth, Enoch, his head encircled with a dazzling white wreath, surmounted with a lovely crown brighter than the sun, and upon his arm a glorious palm. And following him a great multitude, all clothed in the pure white robes with the palms in their hands and golden crowns on their heads. Okay. Now it says, fifth, we have Elijah, the faithful arrayed in a glorious white mantle, from his shoulders unto his feet, leading the 144,000, a royal priesthood, all like himself attired in a glorious white mantle. Now notice Elijah is this fifth group that appears. And Elijah also appears among that fifth group in Matthew 20, verse 6, called at the end of the 11th hour, which is the ones that I represent. I represent this antitypical Elijah today. That's showing you about the 144,000, how they are shaping up and getting in order now to come forth. And now we have the sixth group, the Adams, the sons of Elohim from the worlds of Yahweh's universe, with Father Adam in the van. And the seventh one, Yahshua, the King of kings and the Sovereign of sovereigns, the majesty of all creation, the first and the last, and with him 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of angels. This brings the close of our study this hour. You can contact us at the 11th hour call. That's number 11. Click on our audio archives. Hear this message and more. We will close now with a song. Rescue the perishing. Rescue the perishing, care for the dying, snatch them in pity from sin and the grave. Weep for the serving one, lift up the fallen, tell them of Yahshua the mighty to save. Rescue the perishing, care for the dying, Yahshua is merciful, Yahshua will save. Though they are slighting him, still he is waiting the penitent child to receive. Plead with them earnestly, plead with them gently. He will forgive if they wholly believe. Rescue the perishing, care for the dying. Yahshua is merciful, Yahshua will save. Down in the human heart, crushed by the tempter, feelings not buried that grace can restore. Touched by a loving heart, wakened by kindness, chords that were broken will vibrate once more. Rescue the perishing, care for the dying. Yahshua is merciful, Yahshua will save. Rescue the perishing, duty demands it. Strength for the labor the Yah will provide. Back to the narrow way, patiently wend them. Tell the poor wanderer a Savior has died. Rescue the perishing, care for the dying. Yeshua is merciful, Yeshua will save.